As David Kibuka likes to say to me, to keep choosing the same thing, because it's like digging a hole. If you dig a hole, eventually, if you start digging, eventually there'll be a hole.
Welcome to another edition of the Art of Individuality on Between 10 and 5, brought to you by Glenn Fiddich. Today we've got Kagiso Lediga, who's joining us all the way from Joburg, obviously. Kagiso, it's amazing to have you on the show today. What was your first big break in the industry, as a comedian and then as a content producer, really?
Essentially, when I left high school, I wanted to make movies and do stand-up, like Woody Allen. You know, that's the only reference I had. And the furthest place, from Pretoria, the furthest place from Pretoria was Cape Town, because I couldn't afford to go to New York City at the time. It was just too far and too expensive for my township parents. So I got there and I started doing I started like getting monologues on the internet, because there was a thing called open class at drama school. Yeah. And then I did one of these kind of stand-up sets. It was, but I guess I delivered it like a comic and all of that type of stuff. And then the following year, they asked me to come and do a set for orientation week, or a few months later. For like the fresh students. And I remember coming up with a set. I was in a taxi going to the Baxter. I think that's where the thing was, the Baxter Theatre. And I came up with a bit in the taxi. I told it to these people. It was all natural, and it was cool. So then next time they invited me to do more gigs on set. David Carr was my sort of schoolmate. We had met in high school. We were friends already from high school. So we did those types of things. And then there was a comedy festival that happens in Cape Town, or used to happen in Cape Town. It was the big comedy festival, the International Comedy Festival, second biggest in the Southern Hemisphere, had all these big acts, Reggie Watts, Jimmy Carr. They were like sort of young, starting out comics at the time. Yeah, then I did these shows. I did like, there was this room at the top there, which nobody actually ever went to, because it was the big festival. Everybody wants to see Jimmy Carr. Nobody wants to see these newcomers. But it was great, because for me it was $350 a night. Yeah. So who's not gonna do that? I'm gonna tell these silly jokes of mine for $350, and nothing came out of it. It was like, I think most times I died. Actually, I was just like, I don't know about this comedy
not
thing.
Happening.
So I left it. And about 6 months later, I met Mark Lottering in the street, and he was like, where have you been? We've been looking all over for you. We've got this thing called the Cape Comedy Collective. Come through and let's, come join us. I was like, cool. I went there. There were all these guys, Conrad Koch, Riyad Musa, all these young guys, Paul Snodgrass, Koki Falco. So I went to the Cape Comedy Collective, and we kind of started, it was a movement, we went all over the city making stand-up. Comedians from Joburg would come there. It was, now you're discovering comedy. I didn't know that there was a comedy scene in South Africa before that, That
was also kind of growing. That was like the comedy scene that was kind of building, you were building the industry, really.
Yeah, exactly. But all we knew at the time was we were watching Eddie Izzard videos, Bill Cosby, Eddie Murphy, all of that kind of stuff. Chris Rock, that was the big thing, Bigger and Blacker was the comedy DVD of the time. Yeah. Delirious was the classics. And then people would tell you about Barry Hilton and Mel Miller, and I was like, whoo! Joe Parker. I never knew that these people existed, and they'd come to the Comedy Collective, and they were like gods. People were like, you gotta see these guys. And I went to see them. I was like, okay, so they've been, then I kind of made, I kind of put two and two together. I was like, also these guys are like the apartheid comedians. And then people were like, no, but these guys were actually against anti-establishment. I was like, yeah, whatever. Desmond Tutu was anti-establishment. Anyway, but I still appreciated those guys. They're still cool. Yeah. And then obviously moving on, then there was this show that I came up with, this show which was from, I was watching in Living Color. I was inspired by the Pythons and all of that, and I thought to make a show with all these comics on TV, for me that would be it. If I made this show with all these comics, the little bits that they talk about on stage, if we could get that on TV as sketches, then would be made. That for me, it was like, then my mother would say, would you understand why I didn't have to get a degree? We would be superstars, everybody would be paid, and that's it. I never thought of life beyond that. I was like, essentially what happens after that is you die, but it's happy. People come to your funeral and they say great things, and that was it, So years later, you know, we started on day one, and then 4 years later, I remember the actual the shoot date of this show called the Pio Manati Show.
Yeah.
And all these comics were involved, and it was crazy. People had to quit their jobs. Joey Rasdeen was working at Alexander Forbes.
Yeah.
Riyad Musa was a doctor somewhere doing his locums or whatever. Tsepo Mokhale was at Investec. Loiso Gola was still 18 years old. And we made the show. And it was a hit on TV, you know.
Yeah.
Koki Falco, all these guys, Jason Cope. And to date, people still say, when is that show coming back? So that I can say is the turning point.
You said like it felt like you arrived at success then. It felt like, cool, now you're done.
But well, I thought
you thought that was going to be
that was going to be. But then what happened is, I remember my eye wouldn't close or wouldn't open the one time because of the stress, because I'd taken like this production. I was now a producer, and I was 24 years old or whatever. I remember getting like a check. The SABC paid you in checks for the production, you know, and it was one of those checks. It was $1 million odd rand, right? Yeah. And I didn't even have proper clothes.
Yeah.
And I
holding $1 million rand in your hand.
Yeah, I had to go to the bank, and it was one of those. I don't know if you've seen those official checks. It's got blocks.
Yeah.
It's got little blocks, and then there's all the digits, you know, with little blocks, and it had from the highest digit to the lowest was zeros, and I was just like, got to the bank with this kind of cocky, thinking that they're gonna treat me, you know, they're gonna show you the room with the coffee and stuff.
Yeah.
Never happened.
None of that. Are you still working towards that?
Yeah, I was still
working towards the room with the coffee.
I still haven't seen the room with the coffee, you know. So that was what happened, and I ended up, it was chaos. The production of that show was chaotic, man. I ended up owing the taxman lots of money. Yeah. Took me forever to pay it off. I mean, I learned a lot about being a person through that process, and it's not so great. Being a person is, I'd rather be naive and stupid and not owe the taxman millions of rands.
Any advice that you have for young people trying to make it in the industry?
How old are we talking about young people?
Let's make it under 25.
25. Okay, you're still cool. If you haven't been impregnated by anybody or impregnated somebody, meaning that you don't have hectic responsibilities, now you got to think of like young'uns coming after you, which means you most probably have pressure to get a real job and pay for things. Then good for you. You know, you're winning. Step one. Yeah. If you have those things, if you've been knocked up or you've knocked up people and you're thinking about these pressures, you're not out of the game yet, but it's gonna be a bit hard. Yeah. But you know, just hang in there. You know, just kind of like, if you choose the same thing, as David Kibuka likes to say to me, keep choosing the same thing, you know, because it's like digging a hole. If you dig a hole, eventually, you know, if you start digging, eventually there'll be a hole. Yeah. But if you kind of dig all over, there'll be little puddle places there, but not a real hole, you know. But if you just kind of commit to digging, and also if you're digging on a stone, it's going to be hard. So choose a place, to, you know. So I don't know, I'm kind of being metaphorical and stuff.
I get you.
But choose the same thing, dedicate yourself to your art, and try to be better than all the people around you at doing that thing that you do. Yeah. I find that helps, because if I'm coming to pick, or if anybody's coming to look, they'll generally choose the best thing. Yeah. You know, so try to be that. Yeah.
Kagiso, thank you so much for your time. It's been great to have you.
Thanks for the coffee.
Yeah.
And
soup.
And everything, and the soup.
Yeah.
It was great.